This is the Best of the Week on Relevant Radio.
The culture's railed against leadership and also complained about failed leadership in our modern culture. Today, you have trends with everything from the rejection of church hierarchy to the rejection of family structure. While at the same time, in businesses, you have decentralized command. Everyone has a voice. Good elements, bad elements. But joining me today is Father Nathan Cromly. He's the founder and president of the St. John Leadership Network. And we're diving into leadership from the perspective of the church and how that ties into businesses and families. Father Nathan, welcome back to the program. How does leadership in business and the home compare to what we find in our new Pope, Pope Leo XIV, and the overall church structure that we've had for 2,000 years now?
Well, thanks, Timmerie, and I love being on the show, and I love what you're doing with Training with Timmerie. It's an example of leadership, right? When you look at leadership at its heart and core, leadership is about influence. It's about impacting the world around. When you are impacting the world around you, you're changing it from its state where it could be something different to actually being something different. And when you do that intentionally, well, you're practicing intentional impact. You're practicing leadership. Now, the thing that's so neat about Christianity, and one of the reasons I'm excited as a Catholic priest to be dedicating my ministry to really studying and making an impact in leadership, is because Christianity is all about that impact. Jesus sent the 12 apostles out to take the gospel where it was not and to leave the church behind. That's an extremely proactive action. It's something that's very impactful, assertive, driven. If we're not making a change, we're not living out our Christian life. And the change that we're making isn't just a change of like, I'm a human being making change. It's God's impact, God's influence in the world. How can I bring Jesus where he was not and leave the church behind? So then you take that perspective and say, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a business owner, I'm a speaker, I'm a nurse, wherever you are. And then you say, well, God's put me there in order to make his impact through my sphere of influence. You suddenly have a real way of understanding what the Christian life is all about. And so it's really all about, in the end, intentionally making God known, making God seen, being a witness of hope for our world. And that's where the leadership studies and leadership understanding really comes into this. Like, if I'm really living out my Catholic faith, living out my Christian faith, then I'm going to be a leader. I'm going to listen better, be more compassionate, more uplifting, because I'm constantly trying to make Jesus's impact, bring it to bear in our society.
Well, and you look at the example of the new Pope, and, we're listening, we're watching his first homilies, his first Wednesday audiences, the various things he has to say, and you're excited because you see this example where he's saying, I'm called to holiness, and you're called to holiness with me, and let's look at what that looks like. He gave the example in his first homily during his inauguration of that papal mass for him, and really focusing in on the example of Peter and how Peter was called to learn sacrificial love and how that is bringing Christ into the world, to learn that love of God himself.
Oh, I'm glad you brought up the example of the Pope, because there you have a very particular kind of an example of what it means to be a Christian leader, because he has, on the one hand, an immense platform, right? So he has power. What he says goes, and he can appoint people to positions, and he has people listening to him, subscribing to his feed, et cetera, whatever you want to look at it. Like, the Pope is an immensely powerful position, but the position is not the same as authority. And this is what's really beautiful about Christian leadership, is that we make a distinction between power and authority. And we could say the power is given to you from the outside. It's your position. It's how much you're paid. It's your status in society. So if you're the head of a state, like the Pope is, or the leader of a diocese, like a bishop is, Or if you're the head of a parish and you're the president effectively of the nonprofit called your parish, which is what a priest is, well, then you have a powerful position, but that's not the same as leadership. Leadership is, in the Christian sphere, is a function of authority, meaning that the leadership that we're trying to bring to the world as Christians, if it's going to really be the impact of Jesus, it doesn't flow from a position. It flows from the proximity of our hearts and souls with Christ. The holier that we are on the inside, and the more that we are like Jesus on the inside, the more that his radiance will come through us to the other people that are around us. And we'll be really making his influence known because of who we are, the authority of the truth that is inside of us. And then now, obviously, if we can combine the two, and we can have that beautiful soul that is one with God, and we put it in a position of power, that's the ideal. Because now the radiance of Christ can reach further. It can use those platforms of the position to go even further into society. But we don't confuse the two. Because in the end, I mean, when you think about the lives of the saints who really changed the world, not all of them had big platforms of power. Some of them are very humble beings. And yet they impacted the world with an impact that lasts, the impact of the saints.
Can you address a common trend I see? I would say more so with men, and men of all ages in their various places in their career, where I hear a lot of, well, I can't lead, I can't have influence because I don't have the authority to be the decision maker.
I love that. That's a good one. I think that's really funny because if that was the truth, Timmerie, think about it, like the only person that would be the leader is the Pope.
Right. So don't function, don't live, don't brush your teeth or get out of bed.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm not the decision maker. So I guess if you're not the president or the Pope or the king, then you're not no. What they're equating with there, that's a good example, is they're equating leadership with power. And on the contrary, if you equate leadership with authority, meaning that authority is the result of truth. When a person is true, when they're full of integrity, when they know who they are, then what they say bends the world around them. What they say and what they do. At that point, someone who is a good man, for example, since you used the example of men, I would say to them, how good are you at listening? So you're like, well, I'm not the decision maker. You don't have to be necessarily the decision maker. To allow the decision maker, though, to be impactful, the decision maker needs a good support team. And to make the decision maker's decisions really impactful, the decision maker needs to be listened to, coached, understood, affirmed, encouraged. And in a very real way, if we don't have those people behind us, then the decision maker won't make the right decisions, or the decisions that they will make won't bear fruit in difficulty. So it's kind of like to see that the supportive roles are just as important, and I would even say more important, than the relatively easy function of stepping into a responsibility and making a decision. That's easy when you have all the information in front of you, when you have a good sports staff behind you, when you've got people that are there to encourage you no matter what. I mean, that is relatively easy. And that's where all those other roles, those are roles of leadership. And so I would throw it right back. If some guy gave me that kind of thing, I'd be like, I guess you don't understand what leadership really is. Because behind every person who's achieved something great, there have been the people who have brought them to that point and who have helped them along the way. And those people are even more important because what they've done is hidden. And you can't play those roles well unless you play them in truth.
Mm-hmm. And I think that attitude of, well, I'm not the decision maker, so why lead? I can't lead. I don't have authority. I don't have power. It's really solicited laziness in our modern culture. And so I'm glad that you addressed it because it really shows like you don't have to be the person with the quote unquote power or position in order to lead. Oh,
and it also helps us a lot because let's be honest. I mean, in the world that we have today, a lot of people feel disenfranchised. And when you feel disenfranchised, you end up becoming part of the problem instead of part of the solution. And what Christ does is fascinating because none of the 12 apostles have any position in the world. So they could all say, well, Jesus, we're all disenfranchised. We're not part of the Sanhedrin. And Jesus, we don't belong to the Roman Empire. So how do you expect us to do anything? And Jesus said, I am going to give you an authority that the world can never refute on the inside. And then I'm going to ask you to go out there and build a position of power, which is not easy at all. Right? He's like, you need to be entrepreneurs. Go to the ends of the earth and work in the world. And little by little, hopefully, you can find yourself a platform. But your leadership doesn't depend upon your platform. Your leadership is that anywhere, you're almost in a sense, Timmerie, our leadership creates the platform. Because if you really have that integrity of heart and that clarity of conscience, people will listen to you. I mean, there are examples where it doesn't work, but by and large, most of the time, people will listen to you. And then you are able to gain an exterior power, but it's based on the truth of who you are on the inside. That's the way that Jesus works. But he first says, I don't want you to first get a platform and then get a character, then get character, and then get integrity, then get virtues, then get holiness. No. On the contrary, I want you to start by giving me your heart, and then let me give you a platform. And when you put those two together, well, then you've got beautiful examples of the way the Catholic saints have throughout history changed the world around them. But it always starts in the same way. Like the apostles, you got absolutely nothing except faith, hope, and love. And then with the power of the Holy Spirit, you found a church that's got 1.2 billion people in it, and that's lasted 2,000 years, and it's every country of the world.
That's Father Nathan Cromly, founder and president of the St. John Leadership Institute. You can find him at stjohninstitute.org. That's stjohninstitute.org. You can join me and listen on the Relevant Radio app to Trending with Timmerie live each weekday at 6 p.m. Central. Thanks for listening.